The moment Ava Sinclair dropped her silk robe to the travertine stone and stepped naked into the crystal water, Daniel Reed understood that his entire life was about to change. Not because of what she offered, but because of what he would refuse. She stood waist-deep in the shallow end, water catching the morning light around her bare shoulders, and said 5 words that would haunt him forever. "Fix this with me, Daniel." He had 30 seconds to make a choice that would define them both. His hand tightened around the pool skimmer. His daughter's face flashed through his mind, and he made the decision that would save them or destroy everything he'd worked for. If you want to know whether Daniel crossed that line, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back where it all began. Daniel Reed's alarm went off at 4:45 every Wednesday morning, exactly 15 minutes earlier than the other 6 days of the week. He'd learned years ago that the Sinclair estate required that extra buffer, not because the drive from his apartment in Reseda took longer, but because the gate security protocols, the winding private driveway, and the sheer psychological adjustment of entering that world demanded time he couldn't afford to lose. He rolled out of bed in the darkness, his body moving through the familiar choreography of his morning routine. The shower ran cold for the first 30 seconds. The building's ancient water heater struggled this time of year, but Daniel had stopped noticing. He dressed in his work uniform, navy cargo pants, a gray polo shirt with crystal-clear pool services embroidered over the pocket, steel-toed boots that had cost him 2 weeks' worth of groceries but would last 3 years if he treated them right. In the kitchenette, he measured coffee grounds with the precision of someone who'd learned that every ounce mattered. While the machine gurgled to life, he moved to the second bedroom, barely large enough for a twin bed and a dresser, and stood in the doorway, watching the small form beneath the Batman comforter. Emma, 5 years old, slept with her mouth slightly open, one arm thrown above her head in complete abandon. Her dark curls spread across the pillow, and in the dim light filtering through the window, she looked exactly like her mother had at that age. Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest, part love, part loss, part determination so fierce it sometimes frightened him. He didn't wake her. Mrs. Chen from 3B would be by at 6:30, as she was every Wednesday, to get Emma ready for kindergarten. The arrangement cost him $20 a week he could barely afford, but it was $20 less than any other childcare option, and Mrs. Chen loved Emma like her own granddaughter. By 5:15, Daniel was on the road, his van loaded with equipment that represented every cent he'd saved over 3 years. Telescopic poles, vacuum heads, chemical testing kits, brushes in 4 different grades of stiffness. The van itself was 12 years old, bought used from another pool service that had gone under during the recession. The engine knocked on cold mornings, and the transmission slipped occasionally, but Daniel maintained it with the same meticulous care he brought to every pool on his route. The Sinclair estate was his first stop every Wednesday. He'd specifically requested that slot when Crystal Clear had landed the contract 18 months ago. His supervisor, Roger, had been surprised. Most technicians preferred the Sinclair job later in the day, after the household staff had cleared out, when you could work in relative peace. But Daniel had his reasons. The early morning meant he could finish by 7:30, giving him time to hit 3 more residential clients before the elementary school pickup at 2:45. The drive took him from the working-class density of Reseda through the gradually gentrifying neighborhoods of Sherman Oaks and finally into the rarefied atmosphere of Bel Air, where streets had names instead of numbers and driveways had gates instead of curbs. The Sinclair estate occupied 4 acres on a promontory that overlooked the city. Daniel had looked up the property records once during a slow afternoon at the library while Emma played in the children's section, purchased 8 years ago for $17 million. Current estimated value, $34 million. The house itself was a modernist masterpiece, all glass and white stone and angles that seemed to defy conventional architecture. He pulled up to the gate at exactly 5:55. The camera swiveled toward his van, and he held up his ID badge to the lens. 10 seconds passed, long enough for the security system to verify his face against the database, cross-reference his license plate, and confirm that this was indeed Wednesday, his scheduled day. The gate rolled open silently. Daniel drove through, following the private road as it curved through landscaping that probably cost more to maintain each month than he earned in a year. Japanese maples, their leaves just beginning to turn with the early autumn chill. Sculpted hedges that looked like they'd been trimmed with surgical instruments. Lighting fixtures embedded in the ground, casting dramatic shadows even though dawn was breaking. The pool house came into view first, a structure larger than his entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a roof deck. Beyond it, the infinity pool stretched 60 feet, its far edge seeming to drop off into space, the city sprawling below in the soft morning light. Daniel parked in his designated spot behind the pool house, out of sight from the main residence. He'd been given very specific instructions during his first visit. Arrive by 6, park behind the pool house, complete service by 7:30, depart without entering the main house, or interacting with household staff unless absolutely necessary. The Sinclairs, or more accurately Ms. Sinclair, as there was no Mr. Sinclair, valued privacy and efficiency in equal measure. He unloaded his equipment with practiced efficiency, setting up his testing kit on the small table beneath the pool house awning. The routine never varied. Water chemistry first, then skimming, then vacuuming, then brushing, then a final chemical balance if needed. 2 hours of work that he could do in his sleep, which was fortunate because he often had to. The pool was immaculate, as always. Ava Sinclair employed a full staff to maintain her property, including a team that cleaned the pool deck daily. Daniel's job was technical, ensuring the water chemistry remained perfect. The filtration system operated flawlessly, the heating elements maintained their precise temperature. It was skilled work, the kind that required certification and experience, but it was also invisible work. If he did his job correctly, no one ever noticed. He tested the pH first. 7.4, exactly where it should be. Chlorine levels, alkalinity, calcium hardness, all within optimal ranges. The pool's automated system was state-of-the-art, one of the most sophisticated Daniel had ever worked on, but it still required human oversight. Sensors could fail, weather could introduce variables, and wealthy clients paid premium prices for the assurance that a trained professional was personally verifying everything the machines reported. As he moved around the pool's perimeter with his skimmer net, collecting the few leaves that had fallen overnight, Daniel fell into the meditative rhythm that made this work bearable. The sun was climbing now, painting the water with shifting patterns of light. The city below was waking up. He could see the freeways beginning to clog with morning traffic, tiny cars crawling along like ants. Up here, though, everything was silent, peaceful. It was easy to forget in moments like this about the stack of bills on his kitchen counter, about Emma's school requesting supplies he couldn't afford yet, about the van's transmission and how much longer it would hold out, about how tired he was, bone-deep tired, the kind that sleep never quite fixed. "You're very precise." Daniel's head snapped up. His heart kicked against his ribs. Ava Sinclair stood on the second-floor balcony of the main house, perhaps 40 feet away, looking down at him. She wore white, a long robe that might have been silk, though Daniel didn't know enough about expensive fabrics to be sure. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, and she held a cup of coffee in both hands. This was the first time she'd ever spoken to him. In 18 months of Wednesday mornings, Daniel had seen her exactly twice, both times at a distance, moving through the glass-walled rooms of her house. He knew what she looked like from photos. Her face appeared regularly in business magazines and tech industry news. Ava Sinclair, founder and CEO of Meridian Technologies, youngest woman to take a company public in the last decade, estimated net worth somewhere north of $2 billion. But those photos didn't quite capture the reality of her. She was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'5" with a slender build that the oversized robe emphasized rather than hid. Her face was striking rather than conventionally beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, a strong nose, eyes that were intensely dark even at this distance. Daniel realized he'd been staring for several seconds without responding. "I try to be," he said, then immediately felt stupid. What kind of response was that? "I've watched you work," Ava said. Her voice carried clearly in the morning stillness. "You move around the pool in the exact same pattern every week. You test the same spots in the same order. You even clean your equipment in the same sequence when you're finished." Daniel wasn't sure if this was criticism or observation. "Consistency is important for proper maintenance," he said carefully. Routine helps me not miss anything. It's calming to watch, Ava said. Everything in my life is chaos and crisis and constantly shifting priorities. But every Wednesday morning, I can look out and see you doing exactly what you did the week before. It's... She paused, seeming to search for the word. Reassuring. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He was acutely aware that he was standing in work boots and cargo pants, holding a pool skimmer, having a conversation with a billionaire who probably spent more on her morning coffee than he earned in a day. I didn't mean to disturb your work, Ava said after a moment. I just wanted to say thank you for being so reliable. It's my job, Daniel said. Yes, Ava replied, but most people do their jobs without caring whether they're done well or badly. You clearly care. She raised her coffee cup in a small salute, then turned and disappeared back into the house. Daniel stood motionless for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Then he shook his head, turned back to the pool, and resumed skimming. But his routine felt different now. He was conscious of being watched, even though he couldn't see her anymore. He tried to tell himself it didn't matter, that this was just a strange moment that wouldn't repeat, that next Wednesday everything would return to normal. He was wrong. The following Wednesday, Ava appeared again. This time she was already outside when Daniel arrived, sitting on one of the lounge chairs near the pool, wearing athletic clothes and reading something on a tablet. Good morning, Daniel, she said when he started unloading his equipment. He was surprised she remembered his name. Good morning, Ms. Sinclair. Ava, she corrected. Ms. Sinclair is what people call me in meetings when they want something. Daniel nodded, but didn't switch to her first name. That felt like crossing a boundary he wasn't ready to approach. He set up his testing kit, hyper-aware of her presence 15 feet away. She wasn't watching him directly. Her attention seemed focused on her tablet, but he could feel the shift in atmosphere. The pool was no longer his private workspace. It had become a shared space, and he wasn't sure what the rules were. He tested the water chemistry. Everything was perfect, as usual. He began skimming, moving through his established pattern. Do you enjoy this work? Ava asked suddenly. Daniel paused mid-skim. It pays the bills. That's not what I asked. He considered the question honestly. I like being outside. I like working with my hands. I like knowing that if I do things right, they stay right. He resumed skimming. And it's quiet. I like the quiet. Me too, Ava said softly. Quiet is expensive when you're me. Daniel wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he didn't. They fell into silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Daniel continued working, and Ava continued reading, and the morning sun climbed higher. After about 20 minutes, Ava stood, gathered her tablet, and headed back toward the house. Same time next week? She said as she reached the door. I'm here every Wednesday, Daniel replied. Good, Ava said. And then she was gone. It became a pattern. Every Wednesday morning, Ava would be outside when Daniel arrived. Sometimes she worked on her tablet. Sometimes she swam laps while he cleaned. Sometimes she just sat and drank coffee and watched the city wake up. They talked, in fragments and pieces. Never long conversations, just exchanges that happen naturally, the way people talk when they're sharing space but not demanding attention. Daniel learned that Ava swam every morning when she was home, which was less often than she wanted. That she'd founded Meridian Technologies from her apartment 7 years ago with $15,000 and an algorithm. That she had no family to speak of, parents deceased, no siblings, no partner. That Wednesdays were her protected days, blocked off from all meetings and obligations, the only time her schedule was truly hers. Ava learned that Daniel had a daughter, that he'd been doing pool service for 4 years since Emma's mother had died, complications from what should have been a routine surgery, medical debt that had crushed him, a choice between 2 careers and the one that let him set his own schedule and be available for his daughter, that he'd never intended to be a single father, but had learned to be a good one anyway. That he read to Emma every night, the same worn copy of Charlotte's Web they'd been cycling through for 6 months because it was her favorite. The conversations were never forced. Days would pass in comfortable silence, and then one of them would say something, and a thread would unspool for a few minutes before naturally ending. Daniel found himself looking forward to Wednesdays in a way he hadn't before, Not just because the Sinclair job paid well, but because those 2 hours felt different from the rest of his week. Less like work, more like he didn't quite know what, something he didn't have language for. She what all saints. 6 weeks into this new pattern, Ava said something that shifted everything. Daniel was adjusting the pool's chemical dispenser, his hands slick with chlorine despite his gloves, when she spoke from her lounge chair. "This is the only time I'm completely alone," she said. Daniel looked up. "What about the rest of your house, your bedroom?" "My house has staff," Ava said. "Security monitors. My assistant has keys. My attorney has permission to interrupt for emergencies. My bedroom has a panic button that connects directly to a security company." She gazed out at the view. "The only place I'm truly alone is out here, on Wednesday mornings, with someone who wants absolutely nothing from me." The weight of that statement settled over Daniel. He understood suddenly why she came out here, why she'd started talking to him. It wasn't about him specifically, it was about what he represented. Someone with no agenda, no angle, no reason to perform or persuade or manipulate. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Don't be," Ava replied. "I chose this life. I built it deliberately. I just didn't understand when I was building it how lonely it would be at the top." Daniel returned to his work, but her words stayed with him. He thought about loneliness, about the difference between being alone and being lonely. He was alone most of the time. Even when he was with Emma, part of him was alone, holding the weight of being both parents, carrying fears and burdens he couldn't share with a 5-year-old. But he wasn't lonely, not the way Ava seemed to be. Money couldn't fix that, apparently. All the billions in the world couldn't buy the simple comfort of another person who saw you as just human. October arrived, bringing cooler mornings and shorter days. Daniel started wearing a light jacket during his early morning drive. The leaves on the Japanese maples at the Sinclair estate turned brilliant red, and the gardening staff spent hours raking them away from the pool area. Ava's travel schedule intensified. Daniel could tell by the weeks she wasn't there. He'd arrive at 6 to find the pool deck empty, the house dark except for the security lights. Those Wednesdays felt hollow somehow, even though they'd meant nothing to him before she'd started appearing. When she was there, the conversations deepened. She told him about board meetings, where she had to justify every decision to investors who'd contributed money but not vision. About competitors who copied her innovations and undercut her prices. About the exhaustion of being constantly scrutinized, constantly judged, constantly expected to be perfect. Daniel told her about Emma's latest obsession with dinosaurs, about the community college classes he was taking online to finish his degree, about the strange satisfaction of fixing things, pools, broken toys, leaking faucets, when so much of life felt unfixable. They never touched, never came close to touching. The physical distance between them remained constant, always at least 10 feet, usually more. But Daniel felt a connection forming that had nothing to do with physical proximity. It scared him a little. Not because he thought anything would come of it, the gulf between their lives was too vast for that, but because he was beginning to care what she thought, beginning to wonder on Tuesday nights whether she'd be there the next morning, beginning to notice when she looked tired or stressed, or when her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. He told himself it was just concern for a client, professional attentiveness. Nothing more. He was lying to himself and he knew it. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, Ava came out to the pool wearing a business suit, her hair pulled back, her face carefully made up. She had a conference call in an hour, she explained, but she'd wanted to come outside first, even if just for a few minutes. "I'm going to London next week," she said. "I'll miss the next 2 Wednesdays." "I'll still come by," Daniel said. "Keep everything maintained." "I know you will." Ava was quiet for a moment. "That's what I mean about you being reliable. I can be on another continent and know with absolute certainty that you'll be here at 6 a.m. doing exactly what needs to be done." "It's just pool maintenance," Daniel said. "No," Ava said. "It's someone keeping their word. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world?" Daniel thought about the promises people had made him over the years, promises that had evaporated like morning fog. His ex-girlfriend's parents, who'd sworn they'd help with Emma, and then disappeared the moment things got difficult. employers who'd promised stability and then cut hours during slow seasons. Even Emma's mother, in a way, though that promise had been broken by circumstance rather than choice. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think I do." Their eyes met across the pool. Daniel saw something in Ava's expression, a recognition, maybe, an understanding that they were more alike than their circumstances suggested, both alone in different ways, both carrying weight they couldn't put down. Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face shifted, became the professional mask Daniel had seen in photographs. "I have to go," she said. "But I'll see you in December?" "Every Wednesday," Daniel confirmed. She smiled, a real smile this time, not the practiced one, and headed inside. Daniel finished his work, packed his equipment, and drove to his next appointment. But his mind stayed at the Sinclair estate, replaying their conversation, examining the strange intimacy that had developed between them. He didn't let himself think about what it meant. Thinking about it would make it real, would force him to acknowledge feelings that had no place in his life. He had Emma to think about, bills to pay, a future to build from nothing. He couldn't afford complications, especially complications that involved someone who lived in a different universe than he did. So he didn't think about it. He just kept showing up, every Wednesday, exactly on time. But that December came with unexpected rain. Southern California wasn't supposed to get rain in early December, but climate patterns were shifting, and the city found itself drenched by storms that lasted days. Daniel arrived at the Sinclair estate on the first Wednesday of the month to find the pool deck slick with water, leaves plastered everywhere from the wind. It would take him longer than usual to clean up, but he didn't mind. The extra work meant extra billing, and Christmas was coming. Emma had asked for a bike, and he was determined to make that happen. Ava appeared from the pool house rather than the main residence. She wore a long coat over sweats, her hair damp, and she looked different somehow, softer, less guarded. "I swam in the rain," she said, almost sheepishly. "I know it's ridiculous. The pool's heated. It's not like I got wet from the rain versus the pool. But it felt like something I haven't done since I was a kid." Daniel smiled. "Doesn't sound ridiculous. Sounds like fun." It was. Ava wrapped her arms around herself. "Everything in my life is temperature controlled, climate adjusted, optimized. Swimming in the rain was chaotic. I'd forgotten what that felt like." She sat on one of the lounge chairs, heedless of the water still beaded on its surface. Daniel continued working, clearing debris, testing chemicals that had been diluted by rainwater. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ava said after a while. Daniel's hands paused. "Sure." "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. He considered lying, giving the socially expected answer, but Ava had been honest with him about her loneliness, about her isolation. She deserved honesty in return. "I'm not unhappy," he said slowly. "I have Emma, and she's healthy and smart and everything good in my life. I have work that keeps us housed and fed. I have a routine that works." He resumed skimming. "But happy? I don't think I've thought about happiness in years. I think about getting through each day, making rent, being the parent Emma needs. Happiness feels like a luxury I don't have time for." Ava nodded slowly. "I understand that. I don't think about happiness either. I think about quarterly projections and market share and whether my innovations will still be relevant in 5 years. Happiness got left behind somewhere around the Series B funding round. At least you chose your prison," Daniel said, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that was accurate," Ava interrupted. "And fair. I did choose this. I could walk away tomorrow, sell the company, live off the proceeds, spend the rest of my life doing whatever I wanted." She pulled her coat tighter. "But I won't. Because this prison is mine. I built it, and somewhere along the way I forgot how to want anything else." The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, pressing down like a lid. Daniel moved around the pool's perimeter, working methodically, thinking about prisons and choices and the distance between wealth and freedom. "What would you do?" Ava asked. "If you could do anything. If money and responsibility and all of it just disappeared." Daniel didn't have to think about it. "I'd take Emma to the ocean. We'd build sandcastles and collect shells and stay until the sun went down. And then we'd do it again the next day, and the day after that. Just us and the water and time that didn't have to be accounted for." That sounds perfect, Ava said softly. What about you? She was quiet for so long that Daniel thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I'd learned to play piano. I'd read books that have nothing to do with business strategy. I'd sleep past 6 a.m. without feeling guilty. She laughed, but it sounded sad. God, listen to me. I'm a billionaire fantasizing about sleeping late. How pathetic is that? Not pathetic, Daniel said. Human. Their eyes met again, and Daniel felt something shift between them. Not attraction, exactly, or not just attraction. Recognition. Two people who'd taken different paths to the same place of understanding. That success and happiness weren't the same thing. That having everything didn't mean having enough. Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Mrs. Chen, probably checking about pickup time. He needed to finish up here and get to his next job. I should let you work, Ava said, as if reading his mind. She stood, water droplets falling from her coat. Thank you for this. For what? I'm just cleaning your pool. For treating me like a person, Ava said. For not wanting anything from me except to do your job well. For showing up every single Wednesday, no matter what. She started toward the pool house, then paused. That means more than you know. She disappeared inside before Daniel could respond. He finished his work in a strange mood, something between melancholy and contentment. The conversation had opened something between them, a deeper level of honesty that felt both dangerous and inevitable. As he packed his equipment, Daniel caught himself wondering what would happen if circumstances were different, if he weren't a pool technician struggling to make ends meet, if she weren't a billionaire CEO with a life too complicated for ordinary connections, if they'd met in some alternate universe where the barriers between them didn't exist. But circumstances weren't different. They were exactly what they were, and wanting things to be otherwise was a waste of energy he couldn't afford. He drove to his next appointment, forcibly pushing thoughts of Ava Sinclair from his mind. He managed to keep her out of his thoughts for almost 3 hours. The following Wednesday was the 3rd week of December. Daniel had been shopping for Emma's bike, trying to find something decent in his price range. The department store options were cheap, but poorly made. The good bikes cost twice what he'd budgeted. He was running calculations in his head, trying to figure out if he could pick up an extra job or two before Christmas, when he pulled up to the Sinclair estate. The gate was open. That had never happened before. In 18 months of Wednesday mornings, the gate had always been closed, always required his badge for entry. Daniel's first thought was security breach. His second thought was that he should call it in, let the property management company know. His third thought was that Ava might be in trouble. He pulled through the open gate, drove up the winding road faster than usual, and parked behind the pool house with his heart beating too hard. The pool deck was empty. The main house looked quiet. Everything appeared normal except for that open gate, that single breach in routine that set off alarms in Daniel's mind. He pulled out his phone, about to call the property management emergency line, when movement caught his eye. Ava was walking down from the main house. Not running, not panicked, just walking, wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair loose, her feet bare despite the cold stone of the deck. I left the gate open, she said when she reached him. I wanted to see if you'd still come. Daniel stared at her. Why wouldn't I? Because maybe you only come because the routine demands it, because it's your job, because the gate opens at the right time and everything follows its pattern. She stopped a few feet away from him. I wanted to know if you'd still come if something was different. Of course I would, Daniel said, genuinely confused. Your pool still needs maintenance. That doesn't change because the gate's open. Ava smiled, but there was something sad in it. You really don't understand, do you, how unusual you are? I'm not unusual. I'm just a guy doing his job. No, Ava said quietly. You're a man who keeps his promises, who shows up when he says he will, who doesn't treat people differently based on what they can do for him. She wrapped her arms around herself. Do you know how many people I encounter every day who'd alter their entire personality if a gate was open versus closed? Who calibrate every interaction based on what they think I want to hear? Daniel thought about Roger, his supervisor, who spoke differently to clients than he did to employees, about the property managers who were obsequious with wealthy residents and dismissive with service workers, about the world Ava navigated every day, where everyone wanted something, where authenticity was a liability. That sounds exhausting, he said. It is. Ava moved to the edge of the pool, looking down at her reflection in the water. I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, about honesty and happiness and all the things we talked about. She turned to face him. And I realized something. These Wednesday mornings are the only 2 hours of my week where I'm completely myself. No performance, no strategy, just me. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Ava, I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I'm not propositioning you or suggesting something inappropriate. I just wanted you to know that you've given me something I didn't know I was missing. And I'm grateful. They stood in silence, 10 feet apart, the December morning cold and clear around them. Daniel wanted to say something profound, something that acknowledged what was happening between them, but he couldn't find the words. I should let you work, Ava said finally. I have a board meeting at 9. She walked back toward the house, and Daniel watched her go, feeling like something significant had just occurred but unable to name exactly what. He completed his maintenance routine mechanically, his mind elsewhere. When he finished and packed his equipment, he looked up at the main house, wondering if Ava was watching from one of those glass-walled rooms. He drove away with the gate closing automatically behind him, sealing off that world from his again. But something had changed. They both felt it, even if neither could say it. And the following Wednesday would prove that some changes, once started, couldn't be stopped. The fourth Wednesday of December arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of false spring that Southern California sometimes produced in winter, where temperatures climbed into the 70s and people forgot what month it was. Daniel arrived at the Sinclair estate to find the gate closed and operating normally. The security protocols back in place, as if the previous week's test had never happened. He parked behind the pool house and began unloading his equipment, moving through the familiar motions with practiced efficiency. The pool looked pristine in the morning light, its surface mirror smooth, reflecting the cloudless sky above. He set up his testing kit, checked his watch, 6:02, right on schedule, and reached for the pH strips. I almost didn't come out this morning. Daniel turned to find Ava standing in the doorway of the pool house. She wore a white tank top and loose linen pants, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked younger like this, closer to her actual age, stripped of the armor she wore for the business world. Why not? Daniel asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Ava walked across the deck, her bare feet silent on the stone. She stopped at her usual lounge chair but didn't sit. Because I'm starting to depend on this. On these mornings. On you. She met his eyes. And dependency is dangerous. Daniel set down the pH strips. It's just conversation. Is it? Ava's voice was quiet but direct. Because it doesn't feel like just anything to me anymore. The honesty in her words created a charge in the air between them, something that had been building for weeks but had never been named until now. Daniel felt his carefully maintained boundaries shifting, the professional distance he'd worked so hard to preserve beginning to erode. What do you want me to say? He asked. I want you to tell me I'm not crazy, Ava said. I want you to tell me that you feel it too, whatever this is. Or I want you to tell me I'm imagining things, that you see me as just another client, that these conversations mean nothing to you. She laughed, but it sounded brittle. Either answer would be easier than this uncertainty. Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, and saw beneath the wealth and the success to the woman who swam in the rain because she'd forgotten what chaos felt like. The woman who confessed her loneliness to a pool technician because he was the only person in her life who wanted nothing from her. The woman who tested him by leaving the gate open because she needed to know if his reliability was real or just professional obligation. You're not crazy, he said quietly, and you're not imagining it. Ava's breath caught. Daniel, but that doesn't change anything, he continued. You know it doesn't. You live in that house. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Reseda with my daughter. You run a billion-dollar company. I clean pools for a living. There's no universe where this makes sense. I know, Ava said. Believe me, I've thought about every reason why this is impossible. I've listed them, analyzed them, tried to logic my way out of feeling what I feel. She moved closer, closing half the distance between them. But it doesn't change the fact that I look forward to Wednesday mornings more than anything else in my week. That I schedule meetings around being here at 6 a.m., that I've turned down trips and delayed board meetings and rearranged my entire life around 2 hours with someone who sees me as just Ava, not Ms. Sinclair or the CEO or the brand. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. What are you asking me? I don't know, Ava admitted. I don't have an answer. I don't have a plan. I've built my entire career on strategic thinking, on seeing 3 moves ahead, on always knowing the next step. But with this, with you, I have no idea what comes next. They stood in silence, the morning sun climbing higher, the city below beginning to pulse with its daily rhythms. Daniel thought about Emma, about the life he'd built through sheer determination and sacrifice, about the careful balance he maintained between what he wanted and what he could afford to have, about the fact that wanting something didn't make it possible. I need to work, he said finally. That's what I came here to do. Ava nodded slowly. You're right. Of course you're right. She moved back toward the pool house, creating distance again. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said any of that. Don't apologize, Daniel said. I'd rather have honesty than politeness. She paused at the doorway. That's why this is so hard. Because you're the only person in my life I can be completely honest with. And honesty is the one thing I can't afford to have with you. She disappeared inside the pool house, and Daniel heard the door close with a soft click. He stood motionless for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Then he picked up his pH strips and resumed testing the water, forcing himself back into the routine that had always been his anchor. But his hands were shaking slightly, and the numbers on the test strips took longer than usual to register in his mind. The pool chemistry was perfect, as always. Everything balanced, everything in its proper range, unlike the rest of his life, which suddenly felt like it was teetering on the edge of something he couldn't control. He worked in silence for the next hour, hyper-aware of Ava's presence inside the pool house, even though he couldn't see her. When he finished the vacuuming and moved on to brushing the tile line, he heard the pool house door open again. Ava emerged carrying 2 cups of coffee. She walked over and held one out to him. Peace offering, she said, for making things weird. Daniel accepted the cup, their fingers not quite touching in the exchange. You didn't make things weird. Things were already weird. You just said it out loud. Ava smiled slightly. That's very diplomatic of you. I'm not diplomatic. I'm honest. Daniel sipped the coffee. It was exactly the way he liked it, which meant she'd been paying attention during their conversations when he'd mentioned his preferences. And honestly, I don't know what to do with this either. Maybe we don't do anything, Ava suggested. Maybe we just keep showing up on Wednesday mornings and talking and pretending that's enough. Is it enough? Daniel asked. No, Ava said immediately, but it might be all we can have. They stood side by side, looking out at the view of the city below. From up here, the world looked organized and manageable. The streets laid out in neat grids, the buildings arranged in orderly patterns. But Daniel knew that down there, in those streets and buildings, life was messy and complicated and rarely followed any pattern at all. I haven't told you much about Emma's mother, he said suddenly. Ava turned to him, surprised by the change in subject. Her name was Rebecca. We weren't married. We'd only been dating for 8 months when she got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but we were going to make it work. Daniel stared down at his coffee. She was funny and smart and completely unpredictable. She'd decide at midnight that we should drive to the beach and watch the sunrise. She'd quit jobs on impulse if she didn't like her boss. She lived in the moment in a way I never could. What happened? Ava asked softly. Appendicitis, routine surgery, but something went wrong with the anesthesia and she had a reaction, and by the time they figured it out, her brain had been without oxygen for too long. Daniel's voice remained steady, years of practice keeping the emotion contained. She was on life support for 3 weeks. Emma was 2 years old. I had to decide whether to keep the machines running or let her go. Ava didn't say anything, just listened. I chose to let her go, Daniel continued. And then I had medical bills for $140,000. No insurance, because Rebecca had quit her job the month before and hadn't found a new one yet. I was working construction at the time, making decent money, but not enough to cover that debt. So I took bankruptcy. Lost our apartment. Moved in with my parents for 8 months until I could get back on my feet. I'm so sorry, Ava said. The point is, Daniel said, I learned that wanting something doesn't make it possible, that feelings don't change circumstances, that you can love someone and still lose them, and all the love in the world won't protect you from the reality of medical debt and bankruptcy, and having to explain to a 2-year-old why her mother isn't coming home. He looked at Ava directly. So when I say, I don't know what to do with this, what I mean is that I can't afford to want things I can't have. I can't afford to feel things that will just lead to more loss. I have Emma to think about. I have a life that barely works. And it only works because I'm careful and disciplined, and I don't let myself want things that are out of reach. Ava's eyes were bright with unshed tears. And I'm out of reach. Yes, Daniel said. You are. They stood in silence for a long time. The coffee in Daniel's cup grew lukewarm. The sun climbed higher. Somewhere in the main house, a phone was ringing, muted but insistent. I should get that, Ava said finally. It's probably my assistant. I'm supposed to be on a call in 10 minutes, and I need to finish up here and get to my next job. Neither of them moved. Same time next week? Ava asked. Every Wednesday, Daniel confirmed. Ava nodded, turned, and walked back toward the house. She paused at the door, looked back at him, opened her mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. She went inside without another word. Daniel finished his work mechanically, his mind replaying their conversation, examining it from every angle. When he packed up his equipment and loaded his van, he sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, looking up at the glass walls of the Sinclair residence, wondering which room Ava was in, whether she was looking out at him the way he was looking toward her. Then he started the engine and drove away, because that's what he did. He showed up, he did his job, and he left. That was the only role he could afford to play in her life. The gate closed behind him with its usual silent efficiency, sealing off that world again. But something had fundamentally shifted between them, and they both knew it. The careful distance they'd maintained, the professional boundaries, the unspoken agreement to keep things simple, all of it had crumbled under the weight of honesty. And Daniel had no idea what would happen next. The rest of that day passed in a blur. He serviced 3 more pools, each one bleeding into the next, his hands moving through familiar tasks while his mind stayed fixed on the conversation at the Sinclair estate. By the time he picked Emma up from school, he'd managed to push most of it aside, to lock it away in a mental compartment where it couldn't interfere with being the father she needed. "Daddy, you look sad," Emma said from her booster seat as they drove home. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking about work." "Do you like your work?" Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Some days more than others. Mrs. Patterson says we should do jobs that make us happy. She says life's too short to do things we don't like." Daniel thought about Ava's question weeks ago. "Are you happy?" And his own answer that happiness felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. "Mrs. Patterson is right," he said. "But sometimes we do jobs that we need to do, even if they don't make us happy, because they take care of the people we love." Emma considered this seriously. "You mean me?" "Yeah, baby. I mean you." "Well, I love you, Daddy, so that's good, right?" "Yeah," Daniel said, his throat tight. "That's very good." That night, after Emma had fallen asleep and Daniel sat at his tiny kitchen table reviewing bills and work schedules, he found himself thinking about parallel lives. Somewhere in another universe, he was a different person, someone with a college degree and a career instead of a job. Someone who could walk into Ava Sinclair's world without feeling like an imposter. Someone who could offer more than just reliability and honest conversation. But in this universe, in this life, he was Daniel Reed, single father, pool technician, a man who'd learned through hard experience that wanting things didn't make them possible. He went to bed that night and dreamed of infinity pools that stretched endlessly, their far edges disappearing into nothing, and of trying to reach someone on the other side but finding the distance too great to cross. Christmas came and went. Daniel managed to buy Emma the bike she wanted, a blue one with training wheels and streamers on the handlebars. She rode it in circles around the apartment complex parking lot, shrieking with delight. And for a few hours, Daniel felt something close to happiness, close enough to count. The Wednesday after Christmas fell on the last day of the year. Daniel debated whether the Sinclair estate would even need service during the holidays, But his schedule showed the appointment, so he showed up as always. The gate opened on his approach. The drive was decorated with simple white lights, elegant and understated. As he parked behind the pool house, he saw Ava already outside, sitting on the edge of the pool with her feet dangling in the water. She turned when she heard his van door close. "I wasn't sure you'd come. It's New Year's Eve, like—" "The pool doesn't know it's a holiday," Daniel said, unloading his equipment. "Still, most people would have taken the day off." "I'm not most people." "No," Ava said softly. "You're really not." Daniel set up his testing kit, hyper-conscious of her presence just a few feet away. She was wearing a simple black dress, her hair down, makeup subtle but present. She looked like she was ready for some elegant New Year's Eve celebration, not sitting alone by her pool at 6 in the morning. "Do you have plans tonight?" he asked. "Fundraiser gala downtown, $500 a plate, black tie required, 200 of the city's wealthiest people pretending to care about whatever charity we're supposedly supporting." Ava kicked her feet gently in the water. "I'd rather stay home and watch the ball drop on TV." "Then why go?" "Because that's what people like me do. We show up, we write checks, we network and smile and act like we're having a wonderful time." She looked up at him. "What about you? Plans?" "Emma and I usually watch movies and eat popcorn. She falls asleep around 9:30, and I watch the countdown alone with a beer." Daniel tested the pH. "Not glamorous, but it's ours." "That sounds perfect," Ava said with genuine longing. Daniel moved around the pool, working while Ava sat watching. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of winter day that made people forget it was supposed to be cold. After a while, Ava pulled her feet from the water and moved to one of the lounge chairs. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began. "About not being able to afford to want things you can't have." Daniel paused in his skimming. "And I realized something," Ava continued. "I've spent my entire adult life wanting things and then making them possible through sheer force of will. I wanted to build a company, so I did. I wanted to go public, so I made it happen. I wanted to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry, so I fought until I was." She wrapped her arms around her knees. "But you can't force human connection. You can't strategize your way into intimacy. You can't acquire emotional honesty through market manipulation." "No," Daniel agreed quietly. "You can't." "So I don't know what to do with this," Ava said. "With you. With whatever this is that's happening between us. Because all my usual tools don't work here." Daniel set down his skimmer and turned to face her fully. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe the fact that your usual tools don't work is exactly why this feels different." "Different how?" "Real," Daniel said. "Not transactional, not strategic, just two people who accidentally found something honest in the middle of their completely separate lives." Ava stood and walked toward him, closing the distance until only a few feet separated them. "And what do we do with something honest?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "I've never been in this position before." "Neither have I," Ava said. "Every relationship I've ever had has been complicated by what I have, by what people want from me, by the calculations they're running about how I can benefit them. But you don't want anything from me. You never have. You just show up and do your job and treat me like a person." "You are a person," Daniel said simply. "I know, but most people forget that. They see the net worth first, the person second, if they see the person at all." She took another step closer. "With you, I'm just Ava, not Ms. Sinclair, not the CEO, not the brand, just me." They were close enough now that Daniel could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, could smell whatever subtle perfume she wore, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin despite the cool morning air. His heart was beating too fast. His hands felt empty, like they should be holding something, but he didn't know what. "This is dangerous," he said. "I know," Ava replied. "I can't lose this job. I need it too much." "I know that too. And you can't afford the scandal if someone found out that you were involved with your pool technician." "Probably not," Ava agreed. "So what are we doing?" Daniel asked. "I have no idea," Ava said. "But I know that I've spent the last 2 weeks trying not to think about you, trying to convince myself that Wednesday mornings are just a pleasant routine, nothing more. And I've failed completely. I think about our conversations when I should be focused on earnings reports. I replay things you've said when I'm supposed to be listening to board presentations. I've rescheduled meetings just to make sure I'm here when you arrive. Daniel's resolve, already weakened by weeks of accumulated feeling, began to crumble entirely. Ava, I'm not asking for anything you can't give, she said quickly. I'm not trying to complicate your life or put your job at risk or create problems for either of us. I just needed you to know that this isn't one-sided, that whatever you're feeling, I'm feeling it too. The confession hung between them, heavy with implication. Daniel knew he should step back, should reassert the boundaries that had just been thoroughly demolished, should return to the safe distance of professional service provider and wealthy client, but he couldn't make himself move. I think about you too, he said quietly, more than I should, more than makes sense. Ava's breath caught. Yeah? Yeah. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and surrender. I tell myself it's just because you're different from my other clients, that it's just because we have good conversations, that it's nothing more than friendly rapport. But I'm lying to myself. I know I'm lying to myself. So what do we do? Ava asked. Nothing, Daniel said firmly. We do nothing, because doing anything would be a mistake that we'd both regret. Would we? Ava challenged. Would we really regret it? Or are we just afraid of what might happen if we were honest about what we want? Wanting something doesn't make it right. No, Ava agreed, but denying what we feel doesn't make it go away either. They stood locked in that moment, close enough to touch, but not touching. The space between them charged with everything they weren't saying, everything they couldn't say, everything that would change if either of them closed that final distance. Daniel thought about Emma, about his carefully constructed life, about all the reasons this was impossible. But he also thought about Ava swimming in the rain, about her confession of loneliness, about the way she looked at him like he was someone worth seeing. And for just a moment, he let himself imagine what it would be like to reach out, to touch her face, to close that distance and damn the consequences. But only for a moment. I need to finish my work, he said, taking a deliberate step backward, reestablishing the space between them. And you need to get ready for your gala. The spell broke. Ava blinked, seemed to come back to herself and nodded. You're right. Of course you're right. She started toward the house, then stopped and turned back. Daniel? Yeah? Happy New Year, she said softly. Happy New Year, Ava. She went inside, and Daniel stood alone by the pool, his hands shaking, his heart pounding, his entire sense of equilibrium thoroughly destroyed. He finished his work somehow, his movements automatic, his mind elsewhere. When he packed up his equipment and prepared to leave, he looked back at the house one more time, wondering what the new year would bring, whether they could maintain this impossible balance, whether honesty had been a gift or a curse. The gate closed behind him with its usual efficiency, but Daniel felt like he was leaving something essential behind, something he couldn't name but desperately needed. He drove to his next appointment and forced himself back into his routine, but nothing felt the same anymore. Everything had shifted. The careful boundaries had been acknowledged and then deliberately maintained, but maintaining them now required active effort rather than passive distance. And Daniel wasn't sure how long he could sustain that effort before something gave way entirely. The first Wednesday of January arrived with fog so thick that Daniel could barely see 20 feet ahead of his van as he drove up into the hills. The city below had disappeared completely, swallowed by the marine layer that had rolled in overnight. It felt appropriate somehow, the sense of navigating blindly towards something he couldn't quite see. He'd thought about Ava constantly over the New Year's weekend. Between building blanket forts with Emma and microwaving popcorn and pretending to stay awake until midnight, his mind had kept returning to that moment by the pool. The distance between them measured in feet, but feeling like miles. The things they'd admitted. The line they'd approached but not crossed. He wasn't sure if he'd made the right choice by stepping back. He only knew it was the safe choice. And safety was all he could afford. The Sinclair estate emerged from the fog like something from a dream, its modern lines softened by the mist, its glass walls reflecting nothing but white. Daniel parked in his usual spot and sat for a moment, gathering himself, preparing for whatever this morning would bring. When he rounded the pool house, he stopped short. Ava was in the pool, swimming laps with steady, powerful strokes. She wasn't wearing a swimsuit. The realization hit him like a physical blow, freezing him in place, his equipment bag slipping from his suddenly nerveless fingers. She reached the far end, touched the wall, and turned. That's when she saw him. She didn't stop swimming. She didn't cover herself or show any sign of embarrassment. She just continued her lap, stroke after stroke, completely naked in the heated water, the fog creating a strange privacy around them, isolating them from the rest of the world. Daniel's mind went blank. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to get in his van and drive away, to pretend this hadn't happened. But his body wouldn't move. He stood rooted to the spot, watching her swim, unable to look away, and unable to process what was happening. Ava completed another lap, then stopped in the shallow end, standing so the water came to her waist. She looked at him directly, her dark hair slicked back from her face, water droplets catching the diffused morning light. "Good morning, Daniel," she said calmly. He couldn't speak. His throat had closed. His heart was hammering so hard he thought she must be able to hear it. "I need you to make a choice," Ava continued, her voice steady but not unkind. "You can leave right now, get in your van, and drive away. If you do, I'll understand. I'll call your company and request a different technician. We'll never speak about this again." Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. Or you can stay exactly where you are," Ava said. "Don't come closer. Don't move toward me. Just stay where you are and fix this with me." The echo of those same words from his imagined opening, now made real, sent a shock through his system. This was the moment, the test, the line he'd been dancing around for months. "Fix what?" he managed to ask. "This fear," Ava said simply. "This distance. This thing between us that we keep pretending doesn't exist." She wrapped her arms around herself beneath the water. "I've spent my entire life being afraid of vulnerability, building walls, protecting myself, and it's made me the most successful and the most isolated person I know. So this is, what? Exposure therapy?" "This is honesty," Ava said. "Complete honesty. No performance, no strategy, no protection." She took a breath. "I'm standing here naked, literally and figuratively, asking someone I trust to witness me without trying to possess me, to see me completely and choose respect over opportunity." Daniel understood then what this was. Not seduction, not an invitation. A test of everything they'd built over months of Wednesday mornings. A question that needed an answer. Could he see her like this and still choose restraint? Could he witness her vulnerability and honor it rather than exploit it? Every cell in his body was screaming. Part desire, yes. He wasn't made of stone, and Ava was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or status, and everything to do with the raw courage of this moment. But more than desire, he felt something else, a fierce protectiveness, a need to prove that he was exactly who she believed him to be. "I'm not moving," he said, his voice rough but certain. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Ava smiled then, and it transformed her face. Not the practiced smile she wore for board meetings or the small, sad one she'd shown him during their conversations about loneliness. This was pure relief, pure gratitude, pure recognition. "Thank you," she said quietly. They stood like that, Daniel on the pool deck, Ava in the water, separated by 15 feet, and joined by something that had no name but felt more intimate than any physical contact. The fog pressed in around them, creating a bubble of privacy, a stolen moment outside of normal time and space. "Why?" Daniel asked finally. "Why risk this? Why test me like this?" "Because I needed to know," Ava said. "I've had men tell me they respect me while mentally calculating what they can get from me. I've had partners claim to love me while really loving what I represent. I needed to know if you're different, if what I believe about you is real or just something I've projected because I want it to be true. And if I'd failed this test, then I would have been disappointed but not surprised," Ava admitted. "Most people fail. Most people take what's offered because they believe wanting something gives them the right to have it." "Wanting doesn't create rights," Daniel said. "No," Ava agreed. "It doesn't. But most people don't understand that distinction." She moved through the water toward the steps, and Daniel's entire body tensed. But she stopped before emerging, staying submerged enough to maintain some modesty, though the gesture felt more like consideration for him than protection for herself. "I'm going to get out now," she said. "There's a robe on that chair. Could you hand it to me?" Daniel picked up the white robe, the same one she'd been wearing the first morning they'd spoken, and moved to the edge of the pool. He held it out at arm's length, keeping his eyes on her face. Only her face. Ava climbed the steps, water streaming from her body, and Daniel's discipline was tested in ways he'd never experienced. He kept his gaze locked on her eyes, never dropping lower, never allowing himself to look at what was so clearly visible in his peripheral vision. She took the robe and wrapped it around herself. "You just passed an impossible test," she said softly. "It wasn't impossible," Daniel said. "It was just difficult." For most men, difficult and impossible are the same thing. Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe properly. His hands were shaking. His whole body felt like it had been hit by lightning. "You shouldn't have done this." "I know," Ava said, "but I needed to. I needed to know if I could trust what I feel, if you're really who I think you are." "And am I?" She reached out and touched his hand, just a brief contact, her fingers against his knuckles. But it was the first time they'd ever touched deliberately, and the shock of it ran through both of them. "Yes," she said. "You are." Then she withdrew her hand and stepped back. "I should let you work. And I need to—" She gestured vaguely at herself, at the situation, at everything that had just happened. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Okay." Ava walked toward the pool house, then paused at the door. "Daniel, I know this was unfair to you. I know I put you in an impossible position, but I want you to understand something. What just happened wasn't about sex or seduction or anything like that. It was about trust, and you just gave me something I didn't know I could have." "What's that?" "Proof that respect is real," she said. "That someone can want me and still choose not to take. That my safety matters more to someone than their own desires." She disappeared inside the pool house, leaving Daniel standing alone by the pool, his heart still racing, his mind struggling to process what had just occurred. He looked down at his hands. They were still shaking. He looked at the water, at the ripples still spreading from Ava's exit. He looked at the fog surrounding everything, hiding them from the world. Then he picked up his equipment bag, set up his testing kit, and began his routine. Because that's what he did. That's who he was. The man who showed up, the man who did his job, the man who kept his promises even when everything inside him was chaos. But as he tested the water chemistry and skimmed the surface and went through all the familiar motions, he knew that something fundamental had shifted between them. The distance had been maintained, yes. The line hadn't been crossed, but they'd come right up to that line, had looked at each other across it, and had both chosen to honor it. And somehow that made what they had more powerful, not less. Ava emerged from the pool house 20 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a sweater, her hair still damp but pulled back. She carried 2 cups of coffee and set one down on the table near Daniel's equipment. "I thought you might need this," she said. "Thank you." They didn't look at each other directly. The intensity of what had passed between them was still too raw, too present. Instead, they both looked out at the fog, at the obscured view, at the world that had temporarily disappeared. "I'm leaving for Tokyo tomorrow," Ava said after a while. "Merger negotiations. I'll be gone for 3 weeks." Daniel felt a strange sense of loss, which was ridiculous given that he'd only been seeing her for 2 hours a week. "The pool will still need maintenance." "I know. I've already cleared it with your company. You'll come as scheduled, even though I won't be here." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "But I wanted you to know that I'll be thinking about Wednesday mornings, about this place, about you." "Ava, I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I'm just telling you the truth. That's what we do, isn't it? Tell each other the truth?" "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "That's what we do." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee, watching the fog begin to thin as the sun climbed higher. Daniel knew he should feel guilty or conflicted or worried about what had happened, but mostly he felt something else, something like pride. He'd been tested and had proven himself worthy of trust, and in his life, where so much was uncertain and unstable, that felt like an achievement worth having. Can I ask you something? Ava said. Always. What did you think? When you saw me in the pool? Daniel considered lying, giving her some sanitized version that wouldn't complicate things further, but they'd committed to honesty, and honesty was what she deserved. I thought you were beautiful, he said. And I thought you were brave. And I thought that I wanted very badly to be the kind of man who deserved your trust. He looked at her directly. And I thought that wanting you didn't give me the right to have you. Ava's eyes were bright. That's exactly the right answer. It's just the truth. The truth and the right answer aren't always the same thing, Ava said. But in this case, they are. She finished her coffee and set the cup down. I need to pack. The flight leaves early tomorrow, and I have about 1,000 things to finish before then. Safe travels, Daniel said. Thank you. She started toward the house, then turned back one more time. Daniel, what happened this morning? It stays between us, right? Of course, he said immediately. I would never— I know, Ava interrupted gently. I know you wouldn't, but I needed to hear you say it anyway. She went inside and Daniel finished his work in a state of strange calm. The test had been passed. The boundary had been honored. They'd gone to the very edge of something and had both chosen to step back. But Daniel knew that edges were dangerous places, that standing too close to them for too long made falling more likely, not less. As he packed up his equipment and prepared to leave, he looked back at the pool house one final time. Through the glass walls, he could see the main residence beyond, that architectural marvel of wealth and success and isolation. Somewhere in there, Ava was packing for Tokyo, preparing to return to her world of mergers and negotiations and billion-dollar decisions. And in a few hours, Daniel would pick up Emma from school and help her with homework and make dinner from whatever was cheapest at the grocery store. Their lives existed in completely separate universes. This morning had proven that the distance between those universes could be bridged by honesty and trust, but it had also proven how dangerous that bridge was, how easy it would be to fall. Daniel drove away as the fog lifted completely, revealing the city below in all its sprawling complexity. He had 3 more pools to service before pickup time. He had bills to pay, and a daughter to raise, and a life that had no room for complications. But as he navigated the winding roads down from the hills, he couldn't stop thinking about the look in Ava's eyes when she'd said thank you. The relief in her voice. The way she'd touched his hand for just a moment, a gesture of gratitude that had felt more intimate than anything physical could have been. He'd given her proof that respect was real. And in doing so, he'd proven something to himself too, that he could want something desperately and still choose to honor what was right over what was possible. It was a small victory in a life that didn't have many victories, but it felt significant in a way he couldn't quite articulate. The next 3 Wednesdays, Daniel arrived at the Sinclair estate to find it empty. He performed his maintenance tasks in solitude, the pool deck silent except for the sound of water and equipment. The house looked different without Ava's presence, more like a museum than a home, all that glass and stone beautiful but cold. He told himself it was better this way, that the distance would help reset whatever had been building between them, that 3 weeks apart would provide perspective, would remind them both of the impossibility of what they'd been dancing around. But on the 3rd Wednesday, as he was packing up his equipment, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The merger fell through, coming home early. See you tomorrow morning. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. Tomorrow wasn't Wednesday. Tomorrow was Thursday, which meant she was specifically telling him she'd be back, that she wanted him to know, that their connection wasn't limited to his scheduled maintenance visits. He should ignore the text, should pretend he hadn't seen it, should maintain the professional boundary that was the only thing keeping this situation from spiraling completely out of control. Instead, he found himself typing a response. Safe travels. 3 dots appeared immediately, showing she was typing. They disappeared, reappeared, disappeared again. Finally, a message came through. Thank you for being exactly who you are. Daniel didn't respond to that, couldn't respond to that, because responding would mean acknowledging what they both knew but couldn't say, that something was happening between them that had nothing to do with pool maintenance and everything to do with 2 people who'd found in each other something they'd both been missing. He deleted the conversation thread, as if erasing the messages could erase the feeling they'd created. Then he drove to his next appointment, forcing himself back into the routine that was supposed to protect him from exactly this kind of complication. But routines only worked if you followed them. And Daniel was beginning to realize that some things couldn't be contained by routine, no matter how carefully constructed. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and thought about choices. About the choice Ava had made to stand vulnerable in that pool. About the choice he'd made to honor her trust. About the choice they were both making, consciously or not, to let this continue. He thought about Rebecca, about the choices he'd made with her. The choice to keep fighting for her life until the doctors told him there was nothing left to fight for. The choice to let her go. The choice to take on crushing debt rather than walk away from her memory. He'd learned from those choices that love didn't conquer all, that wanting to save someone didn't mean you could, that sometimes the kindest choice was also the most painful one. And he wondered if the kind choice here was to walk away from Ava before this went any further, before they both got hurt, before the impossible distance between their lives created pain that neither of them could afford. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't do it, couldn't do it, because walking away would mean giving up those Wednesday mornings, would mean losing the only person who saw him as something more than a pool technician struggling to make ends meet, would mean abandoning someone who trusted him with a vulnerability she showed no one else. So he wouldn't walk away. He would keep showing up. He would maintain the boundaries. He would honor the distance. And he would hope that it would be enough to keep them both safe from the fall that felt increasingly inevitable. Wednesday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of January weather that made Southern California feel almost like winter. Daniel's alarm went off at 4:45, and he lay in the darkness for a long moment before forcing himself out of bed, his stomach tight with an anxiety he couldn't quite name. Ava would be there this morning. After 3 weeks away, after that text message, after everything that had happened in the fog that morning before she'd left, she'd be there. And Daniel had no idea what that would mean. He went through his morning routine on autopilot, checking on Emma's sleeping form, making coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, loading his van with equipment that suddenly felt heavier than usual. The drive up into the hills felt longer somehow, each mile giving him more time to think, to worry, to question whether he should have declined this job weeks ago when things had started to shift. The gate opened as always. The driveway curved through the manicured landscape as always. The pool house came into view as always, but nothing felt the same. Daniel parked and sat in his van for a full minute, gathering himself, trying to rebuild the professional distance that had eroded over months of honest conversations and shared vulnerability. Then he got out, squared his shoulders, and rounded the corner with his equipment bag. Ava was sitting on the edge of the pool, fully clothed in a heavy sweater and jeans, her feet bare despite the cold stone. She looked up when she heard him approach, and Daniel saw exhaustion in her face, the kind that came from too many flights and too many negotiations and too many hours pretending to be invulnerable. "Welcome back," he said, keeping his voice neutral, professional. "Thank you." She pulled her sweater tighter around herself. Tokyo was brutal. The merger collapsed on day 12. Spent the last week doing damage control with investors who think I've lost my edge. Daniel set down his equipment and began his setup, giving himself something to do with his hands. "Have you? Lost my edge?" Ava laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Probably. I spent most of the negotiations thinking about Wednesday mornings instead of market share projections. That's not exactly peak performance." The admission hung in the air between them, dangerous and honest. Daniel tested the water temperature, checked his chemical kit, did everything he could to maintain the routine that was supposed to protect them both. "I shouldn't have texted you," Ava said suddenly. "That was crossing a line." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It was." "Are you angry?" He looked up at her then, really looked, and saw that she was genuinely uncertain. Ava Sinclair, who commanded boardrooms and directed billion-dollar companies, was sitting there worried that she'd upset her pool technician. "I'm not angry," he said quietly. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of where this is going. Of what happens when we finally admit that this stopped being about pool maintenance months ago." Daniel returned his attention to his testing kit. "Of losing something I need because I want something I can't have." Ava stood and walked closer, stopping at the careful distance they'd maintained even after that morning in the fog. What if I told you that you're not the only one who's scared, that I lie awake at night thinking about you, that I've started making decisions based on whether they'll interfere with Wednesday mornings? I'd say you need to stop, Daniel said firmly. You have an empire to run. You can't let me become a distraction that costs you everything you've built. What if you're not a distraction? Ava challenged. What if you're the only real thing in my life? The only person who doesn't want something from me? The only 2 hours of my week where I can just be human? That's not sustainable, Daniel said. You can't build a life around 2 hours a week with someone who lives in a completely different world than you do. Why not? Ava's voice had an edge now, frustration breaking through her usual control. Why does everything have to make sense? Why does everything have to fit into neat categories? Why can't something just be what it is, even if it doesn't follow the rules? Daniel straightened, meeting her eyes directly. Because I have a daughter who depends on me. Because I have bills I can barely pay and a future I'm trying to build from nothing. Because I can't afford to lose my job or my focus or my stability for something that has no future. How do you know it has no future? Look around, Ava. Daniel gestured at the estate, at the infinity pool, at the house that cost more than he'd earn in 3 lifetimes. Look at where you live. Look at who you are. Then look at me. Really look at me. I'm a 30-year-old single father who cleans pools for a living. I drive a van that's held together with duct tape and prayers. I buy my daughter's clothes at Target and consider it a good month when I have $50 left over after rent. None of that matters to me, Ava said. It should, Daniel replied. Because it matters to the rest of the world. Because the moment anyone finds out that you're involved with me, if we can even call it that, you'll face questions about your judgment. Your board will worry. Your investors will panic. And I'll lose my job because Crystal Clear can't afford to have their technicians sleeping with clients. We're not sleeping together. That's not how it'll look, Daniel said. The truth doesn't matter. The perception will destroy both of us, just in different ways. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, her expression shifting from frustration to something closer to despair. So what are you saying? That we just stop? That we pretend the last few months didn't happen? That we go back to being strangers who don't speak? I don't know, Daniel admitted. I honestly don't know what the right answer is. They stood in silence, the morning sun climbing higher, the city below beginning its daily transformation from sleeping to waking. Daniel could hear birds in the Japanese maples, could feel the cold stone beneath his work boots, could see the exhaustion in Ava's eyes. I missed you, Ava said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The whole time I was in Tokyo, dealing with lawyers and accountants and people who only care about profit margins, I missed you. I missed these conversations. I missed feeling like myself. I missed you too, Daniel said, because lying would have been worse than honesty. But missing someone doesn't change reality. What is our reality? Ava asked. Define it for me. Because from where I'm standing, our reality is that we've built something meaningful over months of honest conversation, that we trust each other in ways neither of us trusts anyone else, that we've tested boundaries and honored them, that we've been vulnerable and safe. How is that not real? It's real, Daniel conceded, but it's also unsustainable. Eventually, someone will notice. Your staff will talk. My supervisor will ask questions. Someone will see something that looks inappropriate, and then it won't matter what the truth is. So we're trapped, Ava said. We can't move forward because the distance between our lives is too great. But we can't go back because we've already crossed too many lines to pretend we're just client and service provider. Yeah, Daniel said. That's exactly where we are. Ava turned away from him, looking out at the view that must have cost tens of millions of dollars, but suddenly seemed hollow. I've solved impossible problems my entire career. I've found solutions when everyone else said there weren't any. I've built companies from algorithms and turned ideas into empires, but I have no idea how to solve this. Maybe some things can't be solved, Daniel said quietly. Maybe some things just are what they are, and we have to accept that wanting a different outcome doesn't make it possible. I hate that, Ava said fiercely. I hate accepting limitations. I hate being told that something can't work. I hate that money and power and success don't mean anything when it comes to the one thing I actually want. What do you want? Daniel asked, even though he knew the question was dangerous. Ava turned back to face him, and there were tears in her eyes now, though she didn't let them fall. I want Wednesday mornings to be more than 2 hours. I want to know what it's like to have coffee with you without watching the clock. I want to meet Emma and hear you read Charlotte's Web to her. I want to fall asleep next to someone who sees me as Ava, not Miss Sinclair. I want something simple and real and honest, and I want it with you. The confession hit Daniel like a physical force. He'd known, on some level, that they both felt this way. But hearing it spoken out loud, hearing Ava's voice crack with emotion as she admitted what she wanted, it changed something fundamental. I want that too, he said, and his own voice wasn't entirely steady. I want to take you to the beach with Emma and build sandcastles. I want to cook you dinner in my tiny kitchen and not apologize for the cheap wine. I want to wake up next to you and not have it be a catastrophe that ends both our lives. So what's stopping us? Ava asked. Everything, Daniel said. The distance between our worlds. The risk to both our futures. The reality that I can give you conversation and honesty, but I can't give you the life you're accustomed to. I can't take you to galas or buy you houses or give you anything except myself, and myself isn't enough. That's where you're wrong, Ava said, taking a step closer. Yourself is the only thing I want. Everything else, the houses, the money, the success, it's all just noise. It's all just compensation for not having what actually matters. They were closer now than they'd been since that morning in the fog. Close enough that Daniel could see the tears she was holding back, could feel the warmth of her body, could reach out and touch her if he let himself. This is the moment, he said quietly. Right here. This is where we decide. Decide what? Whether we're brave enough to try something impossible, Daniel said, or smart enough to walk away before we both get hurt. Ava reached out slowly, giving him time to pull back, to refuse, to maintain the distance. But Daniel didn't move. Her hand found his, her fingers threading through his fingers, and the contact was electric and terrifying and perfect all at once. I don't want to be smart, Ava said. I've been smart my whole life. I've made calculated decisions and optimal choices and strategic moves, and it's left me with everything except what I actually need. And I've been careful my whole life, Daniel said. I've protected myself and Emma and made sure we were safe above all else. But safety isn't the same as living. They stood holding hands, the sun warm on their skin despite the winter chill, the city sprawling below them in all its chaotic complexity. Daniel knew that this moment would change everything, that once they crossed this line, there would be no going back to what they'd been before. Someone will find out, he said, giving them both one last chance to step back. Your staff or my supervisor or someone, and when they do, there will be consequences. I know, Ava said. I could lose my job. You could face backlash from your board. This could blow up both our lives. I know, Ava repeated. Are you sure? Daniel asked. Are you absolutely sure this is worth the risk? Ava squeezed his hand tighter. I'm not sure of anything except that I'd rather risk everything with you than keep pretending that Wednesday mornings are enough. That I'd rather face consequences than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Daniel thought about Emma, about the life he'd built for her, about all the reasons this was reckless and irresponsible. But he also thought about what he'd told Ava weeks ago, that safety wasn't the same as living, that protecting yourself from pain also meant protecting yourself from joy. Okay, he said. Okay. Ava's breath caught. Okay? We try, Daniel said. We figure out how to make this work. We're careful and smart about it, but we try. You mean it? Instead of answering, Daniel pulled her closer, closing the distance that had separated them for months. He raised his free hand to her face, his palm rough from work against her soft skin, and saw his own fear and hope reflected in her eyes. I mean it, he said. But Ava, if we do this, we do it right. No lies. No sneaking around like we're ashamed. We figure out how to be together in a way that protects both of us. How? Ava asked. I don't know yet, Daniel admitted, but we're both smart people. We'll find a way. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull back, to reconsider. But Ava met him halfway, and when their lips touched for the first time, it felt like something inevitable finally happening, like the last piece of a puzzle sliding into place. The kiss was gentle and careful, both of them hyper-aware of how fragile this moment was, how easily it could shatter. When they pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers, his heart racing, his entire world reorienting around this new reality. "We're really doing this," Ava said wonderingly. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "We really are." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the morning light, before the practical realities began to intrude. Daniel had other appointments. Ava had conference calls. They couldn't stay in this bubble forever. "I should finish the pool maintenance," Daniel said reluctantly. "And I should pretend to work," Ava replied, but she didn't let go of his hand. "When can I see you again?" The question felt strange in his mouth. He'd been seeing her every Wednesday for months, but this was different. This was asking when they could be together, not when he'd be here for work. "I don't know," Ava said. "We need to think about this carefully. Figure out how to do it without exposing you to risk or creating scandal." "Maybe we start small," Daniel suggested. "Coffee somewhere outside the hills, a walk in a park, normal things that normal people do." "I haven't done normal things in years," Ava said with a small laugh. "Then it's time you remembered how." They reluctantly separated, and Daniel returned to his equipment while Ava moved to her usual lounge chair. But everything was different now. The air felt charged. The silence between them hummed with possibility instead of restraint. Daniel worked methodically, testing chemicals and skimming debris, but his mind was spinning with implications and possibilities and fears. They'd crossed the line. They'd chosen to try. And now they had to figure out how to make it work in a world that wouldn't understand and wouldn't approve. When he finished and began packing his equipment, Ava came to stand beside him. "Wednesday mornings stay the same," she said. "You come here for work like always. But maybe Friday evening you meet me somewhere quiet where we can just talk without worrying about who might see." "Where did you have in mind?" "There's a small park near the observatory, not touristy, not crowded. We could walk, get coffee from a food truck, be completely anonymous." "Friday works," Daniel said. "Emma has a sleepover at her friend's house. I pick her up Saturday morning." Ava pulled out her phone. "Give me your number, your real number, not just for emergencies." They exchanged numbers like teenagers, the gesture both mundane and momentous. When Daniel's phone buzzed with her text, just a simple "it's me," he felt the reality of it hit him. They had each other's contact information. They were making plans outside of Wednesday mornings. This was happening. "I'm terrified," Ava admitted. "Me too," Daniel said. "But maybe that's how you know something matters. Because you're willing to be terrified for it." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, transforming her face into something luminous. "Friday, then." "Friday," Daniel confirmed. He loaded his equipment into the van, hyper-aware that they'd just fundamentally altered their relationship and their lives. As he drove away, he looked in his rearview mirror to see Ava still standing by the pool, watching him leave. She raised her hand in a small wave, and he returned it before the curve of the driveway took her out of view. The rest of Wednesday passed in a blur. Daniel serviced his other pools mechanically, his mind elsewhere, replaying the kiss, the conversation, the decision they'd made. When he picked Emma up from school, she immediately noticed something was different. "You look happy, Daddy," she said, studying him with 5-year-old perception. "Do I?" "Yeah, like when you smile for real, not just because you're supposed to." Daniel looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror, this person who knew him better than anyone, and felt a pang of guilt. What would Emma think when she found out about Ava? Would she understand? Would she feel betrayed that he'd kept this secret? But that was a problem for later. Right now, he just needed to get through the next 2 days until Friday, until he could see Ava again in a context that had nothing to do with pool maintenance and everything to do with exploring what they might be to each other. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for being brave with me today." He smiled and typed back, "Thank you for making me want to be brave." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I can't stop thinking about you." "Good," Daniel replied. "That makes 2 of us." "Friday feels very far away." "It's only 48 hours." "That's 48 hours too many." Daniel knew he should probably maintain some distance, should pace themselves, should be rational about this. But rationality had gone out the window the moment they'd kissed. "We'll make it work," he texted. "We'll figure it out together." "Together," Ava replied. "I like the sound of that." They texted back and forth for another hour, the conversation ranging from mundane details to deeper admissions, and Daniel felt something unfurling in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years, something that felt dangerously like hope. Thursday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every hour felt like 3. Every task stretched into eternity. Daniel cleaned pools and made small talk with clients and drove Emma to and from school, all while mentally counting down to Friday evening. His phone buzzed periodically with texts from Ava, quick messages squeezed between meetings, photos of the city from her office window, random thoughts she wanted to share. Each one made him smile and made the waiting harder. Thursday night, Emma's friend's mother arrived to pick her up for the sleepover. Emma hugged Daniel goodbye, her overnight bag nearly as big as she was, chattering excitedly about the movies they'd watch and the fort they'd build. "Be good," Daniel told her. "Listen to Mrs. Martinez. Call me if you need anything." "I will, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, baby." He watched them drive away, then stood in the empty apartment feeling the silence press in around him. Usually he treasured these rare moments alone. Tonight, the apartment just felt hollow. His phone buzzed. "Is Emma gone?" "Just left." "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Daniel considered lying, considered playing it cool, but they'd committed to honesty. "Terrified," he admitted. "Me too. Want to know a secret?" "Always." "I've been on exactly 3 dates in my adult life. All of them were disasters. All of them were with men who spent the entire time either trying to impress me or pitch me business ideas." "This isn't a date," Daniel typed back. "What is it then?" "Two people who want to be together figuring out how to be together. No performance, no pitch, just us." "That sounds perfect." "What should I wear?" Daniel asked, then immediately felt stupid. He didn't own anything except work clothes and the one suit he'd bought for Rebecca's funeral. "Whatever you're comfortable in. I'm wearing jeans and trying to look as unbillionaire as possible." "That might be harder than you think." "Probably, but I'm going to try anyway." They texted until nearly midnight, the conversation flowing easily between serious and playful, intimate and casual. When Daniel finally put his phone down and tried to sleep, his mind was too active, spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. He woke Friday morning with nervous energy coursing through him. The day stretched ahead, endless and slow, and he had no work scheduled. Fridays were typically his day off, time he spent catching up on errands and spending time with Emma when she wasn't at school. Without her there, the day felt strange and empty. He cleaned the apartment thoroughly, did laundry, went to the grocery store, made lunch he barely tasted, checked his phone obsessively even though Ava had warned him she had back-to-back meetings all day. At 4 o'clock, she texted, "Leaving the office now, meeting you at 6? "I'll be there," Daniel replied. He showered and changed 3 times before settling on jeans and a plain blue button-down shirt. Looking at himself in the mirror, he saw a 30-year-old man who looked tired despite sleeping 8 hours, who had worry lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago, who looked every bit like someone who worked with his hands for a living. This was who he was. No pretense. No attempt to be something else. If Ava wanted to be with him, this was what she'd be getting. He arrived at the park 15 minutes early and found a bench near the observatory with a view of the hiking trails. The sun was starting its descent toward the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A few joggers passed by. A couple walked hand in hand. Normal people doing normal things. At exactly 6 o'clock, he saw her. Ava had meant it about trying to look unbillionaire. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a ponytail, no makeup that he could detect. She carried 2 coffee cups and wore sneakers instead of the designer shoes he'd glimpsed through the glass walls of her house. She looked beautiful. More beautiful than she did in business suits or designer clothes, she looked real. Daniel stood as she approached, and they faced each other with matching nervous smiles. "Hi," Ava said. "Hi." She handed him one of the coffee cups. "I remembered you like it black with 1 sugar." "You remembered." "I remember everything you've told me," Ava said. They started walking, following one of the trails that wound through the park, and for a few minutes neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged with everything they'd already said and everything they hadn't yet figured out how to express. "This is strange," Ava said finally, "seeing you somewhere other than my pool. Good strange or bad strange?" "Good," she said immediately. "Definitely good. Just different." They walked further, the trail taking them away from the other park visitors, into a section shaded by eucalyptus trees. Ava reached out and took Daniel's hand, their fingers threading together naturally, and Daniel felt some of his nervousness ease. "Tell me something about yourself that you've never told anyone," Ava said. Daniel thought about it. "Sometimes, when Emma's asleep and the apartment is quiet, I sit on the balcony and look at the stars, and I talk to Rebecca. I tell her about Emma's day, about things that happened, about how I'm trying my best, but I'm terrified I'm not enough." "You're more than enough," Ava said softly. "Your turn," Daniel said. "Something you've never told anyone." Ava was quiet for so long that Daniel thought she might not answer. Then, "Sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and can't remember why I wanted any of this. The company, the success, the money, it all feels hollow. Like I'm playing a role I wrote for myself but forgot the reason I auditioned." "What would you rather be doing?" "This," Ava said simply, "walking in a park, holding someone's hand, feeling like myself." They found a bench overlooking the city and sat, still holding hands, watching the sun sink lower. "I need to tell you something," Ava said, her voice serious now. Daniel's stomach tightened. "Okay." "My board meets next month. They're going to push me to step back, to bring in a new CEO. They think I've lost focus." She squeezed his hand. "And maybe they're right. Maybe I have lost focus, but the thing I've found feels more important than anything I've built." "Ava, I'm not saying I'm walking away from Meridian," she continued, "but I am saying that I'm reevaluating my priorities, that I'm finally asking myself what I want my life to look like instead of just accepting what it's become." "And what do you want it to look like?" Ava turned to face him fully. "I want Wednesday mornings and Friday evenings, and eventually every morning and every evening. I want to meet Emma and prove to her that I'm worthy of being in her father's life. I want to build something real with you, whatever that looks like, however we can make it work." Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I want that too. But I need you to understand something. I come with complications. I have a daughter who has to be my first priority. I have financial limitations that aren't going to change overnight. I have a life that's messy and uncertain and nothing like what you're used to." "I don't want what I'm used to," Ava said. "I want something different, something real, something that matters more than quarterly earnings and market projections." "This is going to be hard," Daniel warned. "People will judge us. Your world and my world don't intersect easily." "Then we'll build a new world," Ava said. "One that's ours." She leaned in and kissed him, and this time there was less hesitation, more certainty. Daniel pulled her closer, one hand sliding into her hair, and for a moment nothing existed except this connection they'd found, this impossible thing that somehow felt more real than anything else in his life. When they broke apart, the sun had set completely, leaving them in the soft twilight. "I should go," Daniel said reluctantly. "Early morning tomorrow. Emma's pickup is at 8. "Will you text me?" Ava asked. "Tell me about your day with her?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "I will." They walked back to the parking lot slowly, neither wanting to let go, neither ready for the evening to end. At Daniel's van, they stopped and faced each other one more time. "Next week," Ava said. "Wednesday morning like always, but also maybe Saturday? If you and Emma wanted to go to the beach, I could meet you there. Casually. Just another person enjoying the ocean." "You want to meet Emma?" "Only if you're ready for that," Ava said quickly. "I don't want to push. But yes, eventually I want to meet her. I want to be part of your real life, not just these stolen moments." Daniel thought about it, about what it would mean to introduce Ava to his daughter, to blend these two parts of his existence. "Let me think about it. Let me figure out how to explain this to a 5-year-old. "Of course," Ava said. "No pressure, we go at whatever pace feels right." She kissed him one more time, quick and sweet, then headed to her own car. Daniel watched her drive away, his heart full and his mind spinning with everything that had just changed. On the drive home, his phone buzzed. "Thank you for tonight, for being exactly who you are, for making me believe that impossible things might actually be possible." Daniel smiled and replied, "Thank you for choosing to try something impossible with me." When he got home to his empty apartment, it didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt like the beginning of something, like the first chapter of a story he'd thought was already written, but was actually just beginning. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel allowed himself to hope for more than just getting through each day. He allowed himself to imagine a future that included not just survival, but joy. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected rain, the kind of soft, steady drizzle that made the whole city feel quieter, more introspective. Daniel picked Emma up from her sleepover to find her bouncing with energy, talking nonstop about the fort they'd built and the movie they'd watched 3 times in a row. "Can we go to the park, Daddy?" she asked as he buckled her into her booster seat. "It's raining, sweetheart." "I like the rain," Emma insisted. "We can jump in puddles." Daniel smiled, remembering Ava's confession about swimming in the rain, about rediscovering chaos. "Okay, we'll go to the park." They spent an hour at the small playground near their apartment, Emma shrieking with delight as she stomped through puddles while Daniel stood under the minimal shelter of a tree, watching her and thinking about how to explain Ava to a 5-year-old. "How did you tell your daughter that you'd met someone? That you were starting to care about someone in a way you hadn't since her mother died?" His phone buzzed. "How's your morning with Emma?" He snapped a photo of Emma mid-jump, water splashing around her rain boots, her face pure joy. He sent it to Ava with the caption, "She likes the rain too." The response came quickly. "She's beautiful. She has your smile." Daniel's chest tightened. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "I want you to meet her, but I need to do it right. Whenever you're ready, no rush, I'm not going anywhere." That promise meant more than Ava probably realized. Daniel had spent 3 years building a life where nothing was guaranteed, where stability was always temporary, where people left or disappeared or died. The idea that someone might actually stay, that felt revolutionary. When Emma had exhausted herself and was shivering despite her raincoat, Daniel took her home for hot chocolate and dry clothes. She curled up on the couch with her worn copy of Charlotte's Web, and Daniel sat beside her, reading aloud while his mind worked through possibilities. "Daddy?" Emma interrupted him mid-sentence. "Yeah, baby?" "Do you ever get lonely?" The question caught him off guard. "Sometimes. Why do you ask?" "Because Mrs. Chen says everyone needs someone. She has Mr. Chen. My friend Sophia's mommy has a new boyfriend." Emma looked up at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. "Do you have someone?" Daniel's heart hammered. This was the opening he needed, but he hadn't expected it to come from her. "I've met someone," he said carefully. "Someone I like spending time with." "Is she nice?" "Very nice, and kind, and smart." "Does she like Charlotte's Web?" Daniel laughed despite his nerves. "I don't know. I haven't asked her yet." "You should ask her," Emma said seriously. "It's important." "You're right. It is important." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Would you want to meet her? Sometime soon?" Emma considered this with the gravity only a 5-year-old could muster. "Does she make you smile? Like really smile?" "Yeah," Daniel said softly. "She does." "Then I want to meet her," Emma decided. "But Daddy, she has to like puddles and dinosaurs. Those are important too." "I'll make sure to ask her about puddles and dinosaurs," Daniel promised. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Daniel texted Ava. "Emma wants to meet you. She has some requirements, though." "I'm intrigued. What kind of requirements?" "You have to like Charlotte's Web, puddles, and dinosaurs. In that order of importance, apparently." "I love Charlotte's Web. I'm neutral on puddles but willing to learn. And I find dinosaurs fascinating. Do I pass?" "With flying colors." "When?" Ava asked. Daniel thought about it. Wednesday was 4 days away. Friday felt too formal, too much like he was scheduling an appointment. "Tomorrow? The rain's supposed to clear. We could go to the beach. Very casual. If it doesn't go well, no pressure." "Tomorrow is perfect. Tell me where and when." They made plans for Santa Monica, 11 in the morning, near the pier but not too crowded. Daniel lay awake long after their conversation ended, alternating between excitement and terror. This was a threshold. Once Ava met Emma, once his daughter knew about her, there was no going back to the careful compartmentalization he'd maintained. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the city clean. Emma was excited about the beach, chattering about sandcastles and seashells as Daniel packed towels and sunscreen and snacks into his worn beach bag. "Is your friend meeting us there?" Emma asked as they loaded into the van. "Yeah, she is." "What's her name?" "Ava." Emma tested the name silently, her lips moving. "That's pretty. Like a princess name." "She's not a princess," Daniel said. "She's just a regular person who works really hard." "Okay," Emma said, satisfied with this explanation. The drive to Santa Monica felt longer than usual, Daniel's nerves making every mile stretch. He texted Ava when they left, and she'd responded that she was already there, waiting near the playground at the north end of the beach. Daniel parked and helped Emma out of the van, and they walked across the sand toward the designated meeting spot. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure Emma could hear it. Then he saw Ava, and his breath caught. She sat on a bench near the playground, wearing jeans rolled up at the ankles and a simple white t-shirt, her hair in a braid, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly together, her knee bouncing slightly. When she saw them approaching, she stood, and Daniel saw the uncertainty in her face, the same fear he felt reflected in her eyes. "Emma?" Daniel said gently. "This is Ava." "Ava, this is my daughter, Emma." Emma studied Ava with the unfiltered intensity of a child. "Do you like Charlotte's Web?" she asked immediately. Ava's surprised laugh was genuine and warm. "I love Charlotte's Web. Charlotte is one of the bravest characters in literature." "What about Wilbur?" Emma challenged. "Wilbur learns to be brave because Charlotte believes in him," Ava said, crouching down to Emma's level. "Sometimes we need someone to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves." Emma considered this, then nodded approvingly. "Okay, what about puddles?" "I'm learning to appreciate puddles," Ava said seriously. "Your dad's been teaching me about the importance of a little chaos." "And dinosaurs?" "I think dinosaurs are amazing. Did you know that some scientists believe certain dinosaurs had feathers and might have been able to see in color?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? I can show you pictures later if you want." Just like that, the ice was broken. Emma grabbed Ava's hand with the easy trust of children who sense genuine kindness and pulled her toward the sand. "Come on! We have to build a castle before the tide comes in." Daniel followed them, watching in amazement as Ava, billionaire CEO Ava Sinclair, dropped to her knees in the sand and started helping Emma dig a moat. She didn't worry about her clothes or her manicure or whether anyone was watching. She just played with his daughter like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the next 2 hours, they built sand castles and collected shells and chased waves. Emma appointed Ava the chief architect of the castle's towers, declaring that she had good ideas about walls. Ava solicited Emma's opinion on the placement of seashell decorations with the same seriousness she probably used in board meetings. Daniel sat back and watched them together, his chest tight with emotion he couldn't quite name. This was what he'd wanted to protect Emma from: disappointment, loss, people who might leave. But watching Ava carefully reinforce a sand tower that Emma had declared very important, he saw something else. He saw genuine care, authentic interest. The same honesty Ava had shown him, now extended to his daughter. "Daddy," Emma called. "Come help! The castle needs a bridge." Daniel joined them, and for a while they worked together, 3 people building something temporary and beautiful out of sand and water. When a wave finally breached their defenses and began dissolving the castle, Emma didn't cry. She just laughed and declared they'd have to build an even bigger one next time. Next time. As if this was already an established routine. As if Ava was already part of their lives. They had lunch at a taco truck near the pier, sitting at a picnic table with sand still clinging to their feet. Emma monopolized the conversation, telling Ava about kindergarten and her friend Sophia and the bike she'd gotten for Christmas. Ava listened with genuine attention, asking questions and responding thoughtfully, treating Emma like a person whose opinions mattered. "My mommy died," Emma said suddenly between bites of her quesadilla. The statement hung in the air. Daniel tensed, ready to redirect, but Ava spoke first. I know, she said gently. That must be very hard. I don't remember her very much, Emma admitted. Just little things. She smelled like vanilla. She sang funny songs. Your dad has told me about her, Ava said. She sounds like she was wonderful. She was, Emma said matter-of-factly. Daddy says I'm like her, that I have her smile. You have a beautiful smile, Ava told her. Emma studied Ava for a long moment. Do you make my daddy happy? Daniel started to intervene, but Ava caught his eye and shook her head slightly. I hope so, Ava said honestly. He makes me happy. He makes me feel like I can be myself instead of pretending to be someone I'm not. That's good, Emma said, satisfied. Daddy deserves to be happy. Mrs. Chen says so. Mrs. Chen sounds very wise, Ava said. After lunch, Emma wanted to put her feet in the water one more time. She ran ahead, and Daniel and Ava walked slowly behind her, close enough to keep her in sight, but far enough to have a moment of privacy. She's incredible, Ava said. You've done an amazing job with her. She likes you, Daniel said. I was worried she might be resistant, or jealous, or she wants you to be happy, Ava interrupted. That's what kids want for their parents. They're more resilient than we give them credit for. They watched Emma jump over waves, her laughter carrying on the ocean breeze. This changes things, Daniel said quietly. Now she knows about you. Now this is real in a way it wasn't before. I know, Ava said. Does that scare you? Terrifies me, Daniel admitted, but in a good way, in a way that feels like moving forward instead of just surviving. Ava took his hand, their fingers threading together. I want to do this right. I want to be part of your lives in a way that's healthy and stable and good for Emma. That means we have to figure out the practical stuff, Daniel said. How we make this work without destroying everything we've both built. I've been thinking about that, Ava said. A lot, actually. Before she could continue, Emma came running back, soaking wet and grinning. Can Ava come to dinner at our house? Please, Daddy? I want to show her my dinosaur collection. Daniel looked at Ava, who smiled and shrugged. I'd love to see your dinosaur collection. It's not much of a house, Daniel warned as they walked back to the parking lot. It's small and the furniture's old and... I don't care about any of that, Ava said firmly. I care about spending time with you and Emma. The drive back to Reseda felt surreal. Ava followed in her car, a sleek Tesla that looked completely out of place in his neighborhood, and Daniel found himself seeing his apartment through her eyes. The cracked parking lot, the building with its fading paint, the stairs with the wobbly railing he'd been meaning to fix for months. But when they got inside, Ava didn't show any sign of judgment. She admired Emma's dinosaur collection with genuine enthusiasm, listened intently as Emma explained the difference between herbivores and carnivores, and complimented the crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. Daniel made spaghetti, the one dish he could cook reliably well, while Emma gave Ava a complete tour of their small space. He heard their voices from the bedroom, heard Emma explaining that this was where Daddy read to her every night, heard Ava asking what book they were on now. They ate dinner at the small kitchen table, Emma's booster seat squeezed between them. It felt domestic and normal and completely surreal all at once. Here was Ava Sinclair, who probably had a private chef and ate at five-star restaurants, twirling spaghetti on her fork and listening to a 5-year-old explain the plot of every Disney movie ever made. After dinner, Emma insisted that Ava had to hear their bedtime routine. So Daniel read from Charlotte's Web while Emma and Ava sat on either side of him on the couch, and he felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like peace. When Emma's eyes started drooping, Ava excused herself to the kitchen while Daniel carried his daughter to bed. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and was turning to leave when Emma spoke. Daddy, I really like Ava. Yeah, baby. I like her too. Is she going to be around for a while? Daniel thought about all the uncertainties, all the complications, all the reasons this shouldn't work. But he also thought about Ava sitting in the sand-building castles, about her listening to Emma with genuine interest, about the way she'd looked at his small apartment without judgment. I hope so, he said honestly. Me too, Emma said sleepily. She's nice, and she knows a lot about dinosaurs. When Daniel came back to the kitchen, he found Ava washing dishes at his sink. She'd taken off her jewelry and rolled up her sleeves, and she looked more at home in his tiny kitchen than he'd ever imagined possible. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I want to," Ava replied. "Besides, you cooked. It's only fair." They finished the dishes together, moving around each other in the small space with surprising ease. When the last plate was dried and put away, they stood facing each other in the kitchen that was barely big enough for one person, let alone two. "I need to tell you something," Ava said, "about the practical stuff we were talking about earlier." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Okay." "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations at Meridian," Ava said. "Not leaving entirely, but bringing in a COO to handle the operational side. I'll stay on as chairman, focus on strategy and vision, but I won't be working 80-hour weeks anymore." "Ava, you can't do that because of—" "I'm not doing it because of you," she interrupted gently. "I'm doing it because of me. Because I finally admitted that I built something successful but forgot to build a life. You've just helped me see what a life could look like." "What will people say?" "Probably that I'm losing my edge, that I'm getting soft, that I should stay focused on quarterly earnings instead of personal happiness." Ava moved closer. "But I don't care anymore. I spent a decade building an empire and being miserable. I'd rather build something smaller and actually enjoy living." "And what about us?" Daniel asked. "What about the scandal when people find out?" "Let them talk," Ava said. "I've faced hostile takeover attempts and market crashes and competitors trying to destroy me. I can handle some gossip about dating my pool technician." "I'm serious, Ava. This could damage your reputation, your business relationships, everything you've worked for." "You want to know what I learned in Tokyo?" Ava asked. "When the merger fell through and the board questioned my judgment and investors started getting nervous, I learned that all of this, the company, the money, the success, it's all just a construct. It only matters because we decide it matters. And I've decided that what actually matters is this." She gestured around the small apartment. "This honesty, this connection, this chance to build something real with someone who sees me as just Ava." Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. "I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone like you." "Someone like me?" Ava echoed. "Daniel, you're the one who taught me what integrity looks like. What it means to show up consistently and do what you promise. What it means to be a good parent and a good person. You have nothing to prove to me. But I can't give you the life you're used to." "I don't want the life I'm used to," Ava said intensely. "I want beach days and spaghetti dinners and reading Charlotte's Web on a worn couch. I want to wake up next to someone who chose to be with me, not because of what I have, but because of who I am." She took his hands in hers. "I know this is complicated. I know there will be challenges, but I also know that I'd rather face those challenges with you than spend one more day pretending that Wednesday mornings were enough." Daniel pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "People at Crystal Clear will talk. Roger will probably fire me." "Then you start your own pool service," Ava said. "I'll be your first client. I'll recommend you to everyone I know. You'll have more business than you can handle." "You've really thought about this." "I've thought about nothing else for weeks," Ava admitted. "I've run every scenario, calculated every risk, tried to find a way to make this make sense. And the only conclusion I keep coming to is that some things don't have to make sense. They just have to be worth it." "And this is worth it?" Daniel asked. "This is worth everything," Ava said. He kissed her then, there in his tiny kitchen with its old linoleum and second-hand appliances, and it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years. When they broke apart, they were both smiling. "So what happens now?" Daniel asked. "Now we take it one day at a time," Ava said. "Wednesday mornings still happen, but also Tuesday dinners and Saturday beach trips and whatever else we want to build together." "What about when people find out?" "Then we deal with it together," Ava said simply. "We tell the truth. We don't hide or apologize. We just live our lives and let other people draw their own conclusions." They moved to the couch, sitting close together, and talked until nearly midnight about logistics and possibilities and how to navigate the complicated reality of their different worlds. They decided Daniel would finish out his contract with Crystal Clear properly, would give notice, and recommend a replacement for the Sinclair account. Ava would be transparent with her board about her personal life, would make it clear that her business decisions were based on sound strategy, not romantic distraction. "It won't be easy," Daniel warned. "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Ava replied. When Ava finally left, it was with the promise to see each other Wednesday morning and the understanding that they were committed to figuring this out, whatever this turned out to be. Daniel stood in his doorway and watched her drive away, her Tesla's taillights disappearing down his street, and felt the weight of what they'd decided settle over him. They were really doing this. They were choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. The next few weeks unfolded with surprising smoothness. Wednesday mornings continued as always, Daniel servicing the pool while Ava worked or swam. But now they kissed goodbye before he left. Now they texted throughout the day. Now their relationship existed in daylight instead of just stolen moments. Emma adapted with the resilience of children, accepting Ava's presence in their lives with simple grace. They developed routines: Saturday beach trips, Tuesday dinners at the apartment, Sunday morning pancakes when Ava wasn't traveling. Ava taught Emma about constellations and showed her how to code simple games on a tablet. Emma taught Ava about puddle jumping and the correct way to arrange plastic dinosaurs for maximum dramatic effect. The complications came, as Daniel had known they would. Roger called him into the office 3 weeks after that first beach day, his expression serious. "I'm getting reports about you and the Sinclair client," Roger said without preamble. "What kind of reports?" Daniel asked, though he knew. "That you're involved with her, personally involved." Roger leaned back in his chair. "Is it true?" Daniel could have lied, could have denied everything, kept his job, maintained the safety of the familiar. But he and Ava had promised honesty, and that meant being honest even when it was hard. "Yes," he said. "It's true." Roger sighed. "You know I have to let you go. Company policy is clear about fraternization with clients." "I know," Daniel said. "I was planning to give notice anyway. I just wanted to finish out my current contracts properly." "I appreciate that," Roger said, and he sounded like he meant it. "For what it's worth, you're one of the best technicians I've ever had. If circumstances were different—" "I understand," Daniel said. He worked his final 2 weeks with Crystal Clear, training his replacement and ensuring all his clients were properly transitioned. On his last day, he received a text from Ava. "Ready to start Reed Pool Services?" He'd been thinking about it, about what it would mean to work for himself, to build something that was entirely his. "I don't have the capital to start a business." "I might know someone who believes in you," Ava replied. "Someone who'd be willing to make a small investment in exchange for equity. Very small equity. Like 2%. "Ava, I can't let you fund—" "It's not a gift. It's a business investment. I believe you'll be successful, and I want to invest in that success. Unless you have a better option?" Daniel didn't have a better option. He had some savings, but not enough to cover equipment and insurance and licensing. He thought about pride, about independence, about not wanting to be seen as someone who was using Ava for her money, but he also thought about partnership, about what it meant to build something together, about how accepting help wasn't the same as being dependent. "Okay," he texted back. 2% equity, and I'm paying you back with interest." "Deal. I'll have my attorney draw up the papers." Reed Pool Services launched in March with Daniel as sole proprietor and a business plan that Ava had helped him develop. His first clients came from her network, friends and associates who trusted her recommendation, but he quickly built a reputation for reliable, high-quality service. Within 3 months, he had more work than he could handle alone. Within 6 months, he'd hired his first employee. The scandal they'd worried about never quite materialized. There was gossip, certainly, articles in business publications about Ava Sinclair's new relationship, speculation about whether she'd lost her focus. But Meridian Technologies continued to perform well under the new operational structure, and eventually the story became old news, replaced by newer scandals and more interesting developments. What remained was the relationship they'd built, the trust they'd established, the life they were creating together, one imperfect but honest day at a time. On a Wednesday morning in late November, almost a year after that first conversation by the pool, Daniel arrived at the Sinclair estate as always. But instead of setting up his equipment, he found Ava waiting with a picnic basket. "I'm giving you the morning off," she announced. "The pool still needs maintenance." "The pool will survive 1 week without maintenance," Ava said. You've been working nonstop since you started the business. You need a break. She'd set up a blanket near the infinity edge with coffee and pastries and the view of the city spread below them. They sat together in the morning sun, and Daniel thought about how far they'd come from that first morning when she'd tested him, when he'd chosen respect over opportunity. "I love you," Ava said suddenly. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. The words had been implied in 1,000 gestures and choices, but neither had spoken them directly. Daniel set down his coffee and took her hand. "I love you too." "I need to ask you something," Ava said, and there was nervousness in her voice that he rarely heard. "Okay. Emma mentioned that your lease is up next month, that your building is being renovated and rents are going up." "Yeah," Daniel said. "I'm looking at places, trying to find something affordable that's still in a good school district." "Well, what if you didn't have to look?" Ava asked. "What if you and Emma moved in here?" Daniel's heart stopped. "Ava, I know it's fast," she said quickly. "I know we've only been together officially for 8 months, but we've known each other for over a year, and Emma's already here half the time anyway, and I have this enormous house that feels empty when you're not in it." "Your house is worth $30 million. It's just a house," Ava said. "It doesn't mean anything without people in it who make it feel like home. And you and Emma, you make everywhere feel like home." Daniel looked out at the view, at the infinity pool he'd maintained every Wednesday for over a year, at the house that had seemed so intimidating when he'd first driven through those gates. He thought about Emma, about what it would mean to raise her in a place like this, about the opportunities it would give her, about the life they could build together. But he also thought about independence, about not wanting to be seen as someone who was living off Ava's wealth. "I need to contribute," he said finally. "I can't just move in and let you pay for everything." "So contribute," Ava said. "Pay rent if you need to, cover groceries, handle the pool maintenance personally. I don't care about the financial details. I just want you here." "What about your board, your investors? What will they say?" "They'll say whatever they're going to say regardless of what I do," Ava replied. "I've stopped making life decisions based on what other people think. That's what you taught me. That authenticity matters more than approval." Daniel pulled her close, kissed her temple, and thought about courage. About the courage to test him that morning in the fog. About the courage to admit her feelings in his tiny kitchen. About the courage she showed every day by choosing honesty over image. "Okay," he said. "We'll move in. But I'm paying rent, and I'm maintaining this pool personally, and I'm not letting you make me your kept man." Ava laughed. "Deal. Although I should point out that as a 2% equity partner in Reed Pool Services, I'm technically already profiting from your labor. That's different. That's a legitimate business investment. And this is a legitimate life investment," Ava said. "We're building something together. That's all that matters." They sat on that blanket, watching the city wake up below them, and Daniel felt the last of his resistance dissolve. This was what he'd been afraid of a year ago, letting himself want something impossible, letting himself hope for more than just survival. But Ava had shown him that impossible things could become possible if you were brave enough to reach for them. That evening, he told Emma about the move. She was in the bathtub, surrounded by rubber dinosaurs, when he broached the subject. "How would you feel about moving to a new house?" he asked. "Where?" Emma asked, making a T-Rex attack a Brachiosaurus. "Ava's house. She asked if we'd like to live with her." Emma looked up, her eyes wide. "Really? The big house with the pool and the dinosaur books?" "Yeah, that house." "Can I have my own room?" "You'd have your own room with your own bathroom and probably more space than you know what to do with." Emma considered this seriously. "Would Ava still read Charlotte's Web with us?" "I'm sure she would." "Okay," Emma decided. "I want to move there. But Daddy, we have to bring all my dinosaurs. All of them." "All of them," Daniel promised. They moved in mid-December, a process made both easier and more complicated by the fact that everything Daniel owned fit in one truck, while everything Emma owned seemed to expand exponentially in the packing process. Ava had prepared a room for Emma that was bigger than their entire old apartment, decorated with dinosaur murals and a bookshelf already stocked with books about paleontology. "This is too much," Daniel protested when he saw it. "It's exactly right," Ava countered. "Every kid deserves a space that's theirs, that reflects who they are." That first night in the new house, they read Charlotte's Web together in Emma's new room, the three of them squeezed onto her bed despite the fact that it was easily big enough for 5 people. When Emma fell asleep between them, Ava looked at Daniel across their daughter's sleeping form, because that's what Emma was becoming, theirs rather than just his, and smiled. "This feels right," she whispered. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It really does." Christmas came, and Daniel gave Ava a gift he'd spent months planning, a photo album documenting their year together, pictures from that first beach day, from Tuesday dinners, from Saturday morning pancakes, pictures of Emma and Ava building sandcastles, of the three of them making cookies, of quiet moments and loud laughter and ordinary days that had become extraordinary simply because they were shared. On the last page he'd written, "Thank you for choosing something impossible. Thank you for making it possible." Ava cried when she read it, then kissed him, and said it was the best gift she'd ever received. Ava gave Daniel and Emma a trip to see real dinosaur fossils at a museum in Colorado, plane tickets and hotel, and a week of nothing but exploration and wonder. Emma talked about it for months afterward, showing everyone who'd listened the photos of her standing next to a T-Rex skeleton. The new year arrived, and with it came a rhythm that felt sustainable. Daniel ran his business from an office he'd set up in one of the estate's guest rooms. Ava had successfully transitioned to a chairman role that gave her more flexibility and less stress. Emma thrived in her new school, making friends and bringing them home to swim in the pool that her father maintained. Wednesday mornings remained sacred. Daniel still serviced the pool while Ava worked or swam, preserving the routine that had brought them together even though the context had changed completely. Sometimes they barely spoke, just existed in companionable silence. Sometimes they talked for hours after he'd finished working, but always they honored what those mornings represented, the beginning of something neither had expected, but both had chosen. On a Wednesday morning in March, exactly 2 years after that first conversation by the pool, Daniel finished his maintenance routine and found Ava waiting with coffee as always. But this time, she was holding something else, a small velvet box. "I know we're doing everything backward," she said, "living together before getting engaged, building a life before making it official. But I wanted to ask anyway." Daniel's heart stopped. "Ava, you taught me what real intimacy looks like," she continued. "Not possession or transaction, but respect and restraint and choosing every day to show up for someone. You taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts, but about maintaining boundaries and honoring trust and being willing to be vulnerable." She opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band. "Will you marry me?" Daniel looked at this woman who'd tested him by standing naked in a pool, who'd chosen honesty over image, who'd learned to jump in puddles and build sandcastles and find joy in ordinary moments. This woman who'd believed in him when he'd been just a pool technician struggling to survive, who'd invested in his business and his future and his daughter's happiness. "Yes," he said. "Absolutely yes." They kissed there by the infinity pool, the city spread below them, the morning sun warm on their skin. And Daniel thought about how far they'd come from that first morning when she'd been just another wealthy client and he'd been just another invisible service worker. They'd built something impossible. They'd bridged the distance between their worlds through honesty and trust and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. They'd proven that some relationships weren't meant to be possessed or consumed, but honored and protected and allowed to grow at their own pace. When they told Emma that evening, she shrieked with delight and immediately began planning the wedding, insisting that there had to be dinosaurs somehow, somewhere. Ava solemnly promised to work dinosaurs into the ceremony, and Daniel laughed and felt his heart so full it might burst. They married in June, a small ceremony in the backyard of the estate, with Emma as flower girl and a paleontologist friend of Ava's giving a reading about how love, like fossils, was evidence of something rare and precious that had survived against impossible odds. Daniel's parents came, and Mrs. Chen and the employees from Reed Pool Services, and a handful of Ava's closest friends and colleagues. It wasn't a society wedding. There were no magazine photographers or celebrity guests or five-star catering. They served tacos from Emma's favorite truck, and danced to music from Daniel's old Bluetooth speaker, and cut a cake that Emma had helped decorate with plastic dinosaurs. It was perfect. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep and the guests had left, and they were alone in their bedroom, their shared bedroom, their shared life, their shared future, Ava turned to Daniel with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not moving that morning in the fog," she said. "For honoring my vulnerability instead of exploiting it. For showing me what it means to be truly seen and truly safe." "Thank you for testing me," Daniel replied. "For believing I could pass. For choosing to build something impossible with me." They held each other in the darkness, and Daniel thought about all the choices that had led them here. Ava's choice to be vulnerable. His choice to honor that vulnerability. Their choice to try something that made no logical sense but felt more real than anything either had experienced. Some relationships, he understood now, existed to remind people what true intimacy looked like. Not possession or transaction, but respect and restraint and the courage to walk right up to a line and choose not to cross it. They'd walked up to that line together. They'd stood there, testing each other and themselves. And they'd both chosen to honor what was sacred rather than take what was available. And in choosing to honor that boundary, they'd built something far more powerful than anything they could have taken. They'd built trust. They'd built love. They'd built a life. Years later, when Emma was older and asked how they'd met, Daniel would tell her about Wednesday mornings and pool maintenance and a woman who'd taught him that some things were too precious to possess. That real intimacy came from respecting boundaries, not crossing them. That love meant choosing every day to show up and be honest and honor the trust someone placed in you. And Ava would add that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stand vulnerable and trust that someone would choose respect over opportunity. That real strength came from admitting what you needed, not pretending you needed nothing. They'd found each other across an impossible distance. They'd bridged that distance through honesty and trust and the willingness to test whether respect was real. And they'd proven that some things that seemed impossible were just waiting for people brave enough to try. The Wednesday pool had brought them together, but it was their choice to honor what was sacred, to respect what was vulnerable, and to build something honest in a world full of transaction and performance. That was what had made them last. And every Wednesday morning, Daniel still serviced that pool. Not because he had to, but because it reminded them both of where they'd started, of the distance they'd crossed, of the impossible thing they'd made possible through nothing more complicated than showing up, telling the truth, and choosing each other every single day. Some love stories were about grand gestures and dramatic declarations. This one was about restraint and respect and the quiet courage of honoring boundaries. It was about two people who'd found in each other something rare, someone who saw them completely and chose dignity over desire, trust over transaction, partnership over possession. And that, Daniel thought, as he kissed his wife goodnight, was worth more than all the infinity pools in the world.